Thank you, Young. Unlike many of the talks you've heard today, this talk is not about a program within TIA or even finished projects and results. Rather, we're here to talk about a project that's currently in play, and today is a very important day for that project because we've launched a phase of TasAg Future, the survey. The survey is sort of a culmination of a heap of work that we've been doing. We've conducted interviews around the state with 100 people working across the sector, which I'll talk a little bit about in this talk. But this project is quite unique in TIA because it has been funded solely by TIA, the organisation, to find out and understand our constituency, the fundamental constituency, the growers of food and producers and manufacturers of food and beverages in this state. Before I go on, I really just want to introduce the team. So TIA doesn't have very many social researchers. You met Deepa before, and Raj is also a social research working across value chains. And we've also recruited Carolina into this project, so she's the one in the middle there. And we have an integrated team in that a core component of this project is communications and engagement. And so Claire is the communications officer, Bronwyn is the project manager and very able at engaging folks across the industry, and Kathy Evans is a strategic advisor and working on the evaluation of the project. It's really important that we understand how effective this project was and efficient at achieving its goals. What were its goals? What are its goals? What are we trying to do here? Essentially, we want to be plugged into the community that we serve and really understand them and their needs and where they're going and what's changing for them. I think a key theme that I've heard today is that this space is changing and changing rapidly, and we need to be abreast of that, not just because we want to be across the latest science and technology, but because we want to serve this community into the future. So we're trying to understand the long-term goals of farmers, food processors and producers, and that will help us clarify a direction. We're trying to understand the work that people have done to achieve their goals, and I'll talk a little bit more about these later. This is a way of getting to innovation from the ground up, what people are actually doing to innovate. We all have ideas of what innovation means, but what are people doing to innovate? We're trying to understand what constrains and enables people to achieve their goals. And this will help identify the critical blockages and leverage points, which are not just concerns of research and development. I think a key message coming through today as well is that we need to collaborate. This is policy research, primarily targeted at research policy, but it's also targeted at industry priorities and at government policy and strategy. So we've been engaging through the project with various stakeholders across industry and government to ensure that our results can have impact for them too. And finally, we want to understand what people see as the key drivers into the future. What are their expectations and concerns about what's on the horizon? We've heard a lot about that already today. Today, I'm just going to touch on a couple of these elements because I don't have time to talk about a lot of our results. In fact, we're still in the thick of analysis. 100 interviews is hundreds of thousands of words, and in social research, we pore over these words in some detail. Not so that we can navel gaze and ask ourselves complex questions about it, but really to understand where people are coming from. It pays to really think about what they're saying and their intent. So I'm just going to talk today about the long-term goals and about the changes and opportunities before we launch the survey, which will be an exciting moment at the end of the day. But first, I just want to give you a quick understanding of what we've done in the project. A really important part of this project is the design and engagement with stakeholders, which is ongoing. We've conducted these interviews, which have just finished recently, and now we're in the thick of analysis. And at the moment, we're in this media survey phase as of today, and the final reporting of the project will be in the end of this year. So I really want to highlight watch this space because we're going to be coming up with some interesting things for discussion, building this discussion going forward and developing TIA's strategy in the new year. We selected our 100 interviewees through quite a rigorous process. We've basically looked across the food producing and processing areas, but in different parts of the state we've had different focus with a lot of cross-fertilisation between these areas. I won't spell out in detail, but you can see that we've covered quite a big area of the state, and we've looked at 7 producing farming areas with a farm focus and 3 areas which are focused on commodity processing, niche and boutique in the south. And the way we've gone about finding people is basically to start off with a well-connected person in each of those sort of networks or areas, and from them asked if they could give us the details of a diverse range of people, and from those people who we've interviewed, gone further out to find further diversity. So the project's not about representing the big picture at this stage, at the detailed qualitative interviews. It's about understanding the diversity and the nuance. I'll give you just a bit of a taste of that because we don't have much time today. I guess when we're talking about long-term goals, we often think people are trying to stay afloat, make profit. But I think Fred's talk today indicated that values are much wider and more diverse, and certainly at a farm level and business level that we've talked to, goals tend to be integrated. People talk about social and economic goals in a completely integrated way. Not always, obviously. Some people express their goals very simply, but we tend to find statements like this. So the main driver and the goal is to make it a dynamic and exciting place to work and live and be involved in, something long-term and meaningful that a family can be proud of being part of, a timeless farming business. So this sense of what people are trying to achieve is connected to family, connected to history, connected to landscape, connected to all sorts of things that we often miss when we're talking about agriculture with a focus on productivity, efficiency, etc. They also vary widely. And I really want to watch this space because we'll be trying to typify this diversity in our report later on this year. But one thing that I really want to highlight today, and it's a theme that we talk about a lot in Tasmania, is this tension, or is it a tension, between commodities and the niche boutique space. The goals in the commodity space are very much about efficiency, scaling up and consistency, and they're driven by a cost price squeeze. People have to get bigger to stay in business. And this is a trajectory in that sector which is not stopping. It's not going anywhere. And it's an important thing for us to consider in terms of the ongoing sustainability, social licence issues, etc. in this space. In the niche and boutique space, people have sort of got out of the cost price squeeze of having to expand their land holding and their efficiency of enterprise by diversifying across the value chain and by focusing on quality, brand identity, relationships with customers, etc. And we've talked about this today, but the richness of what people are trying to do and the way they're trying to do it present a remarkable array of innovation that TIA is only just starting to get involved in. But these are 2 trajectories within the state which we think both have legs, and we really think that these are very not divergent paths in that they're opposite, but they're very different strategies that farmers are taking, which require very different infrastructure and research and development. Why are people trying to do what they're doing? This is a quote from one farmer: "If you really want to make money, you can go into other things." A lot of people talk to us about farming is not an enterprise that you do to make money. If you make money, you plough it back into business. And increasingly, people are thinking about motivations in academic circles, not in terms of the incentives, the regulations, carrots and sticks, but in terms of these components of competence, relatedness and autonomy. So competence, this is rolling by itself, competence came through as things like to make great products, to learn and improve, whereas relatedness came through in things like looking after the land, keeping the family farm. These things are about attachment to place and people and communities. And autonomy came through in things like not to be price takers and to be my own boss. These sort of themes are very consistent and foundational reasons why people are in the business they're in, and often there's linkages between them to make it. competence on our own expresses its independence. These are the fundamental drivers of why people do what they do. And I think when we're doing anything in agriculture, we need to be thinking about how what we're doing aligns with those things. The other component that I'll talk about today is expectations. This work's being led by Deepa, and at the moment this is just a tiny taste again, but we often think about the future as a causal chain where what we do now or what's happened in the past leads to things in the future. But a common way of thinking about it in sociology is that our visions of the future, the way we think about the future, whether it's a 20 billion target, a 10 billion target at 2050, or what my grandchildren's life is going to be like, lead us to strategies in the present. So here's an example. Yeah, I think the reputation of the red meat and to a lesser extent the wool industry and how the industry is going to deal with that is going to be huge. So we can't have our heads in the sand when it comes to that. People are seeing this stuff on the horizon, the stuff that we've been talking about today that Deepa raised around social licence, these imperatives to be proactive about issues that are emerging in the sector are really front of a lot of people's minds and came through very strongly in the interviews. As I said, this is a work in progress, so I'm going to leave you on the qualitative stuff with a few observations of where we're not going. We're not going to an either-or future. It's not going to be a commodity or niche future. It's going to be both. We're not going to an economy or environment future. It's going to be both. We're going to have to govern this thing in its whole, in its totality. And how we will get there, I'm again watching this space, but I'd like to leave you with another quote from a participant, which I'll read to you. There's more than just saying, well, we're just going to roll out irrigation across Tasmania and turn a whole lot of dryland farming into growing cherries and grapes. That's great. That's a big part of it. But yeah, you've got to make sure that you've got the other pieces in place. Roads, ports, administration people. To support an industry that's 10 times bigger, it's going to take 10 times as much of everything else. And I suppose that's what's occupying us at the moment in this project is, what is that everything else? What does it look like? Not just in terms of the research and development, but in terms of the policies, in terms of the industry strategy, the networks, the collaborations, the capacities of people, because it's fundamentally about people, that we're going to need to get us there. So we found out a lot of detailed information which we're still analysing, but in order to make sense of that at a bigger scale, we're doing this survey which basically pulls out the key themes of the interviews and asks people to rate those sorts of things. You can see a copy of the survey out when you're having a drink. If you want, please come and chat to us. I really want to thank the intermediaries who are sending our survey to all of their members. There's a list of them. We've been working with them, in some of them since the beginning of this project, and some of them more recently. Fantastic help and has come to us from across the industry. We're also going to be doing a fair bit of media over the next couple of months while the survey's out, so I'm sure you'll hear of us. But now, to launch the survey, I'd like to play you a short video. Hit it, Maestro.
My family grows fat lambs and sells wool, and we also offer a farm stay.
We've established our own vineyard in the Huon Valley so we can grow the grapes that we like.
We grow vegetables and produce, we raise cattle and pigs, and we bring all of this food from our paddocks to our kitchen and to the plates of our customers.
I'm a third generation farmer on this property, so when it's time to think about agriculture and food in Tasmania, I reckon I'm a good person to ask.
The Tasmanian Institute of Agriculture wants to make sure that the research we do is what people and industries need. That's why we've created the TasAg Future Project, to make sure that our research supports the goals of Tasmanian farmers and our food and drink manufacturers.
To be honest, I was actually a bit surprised when they asked me to be involved in the survey, but I guess no one knows my business better than me.
It's important that as many people as possible fill out this survey so that we can all have a say in the future of Tasmanian food and agriculture.
Taking part in this survey means that I'm not only contributing information about what I do, but I also learn about what other people are doing. A business like ours that's focused on export really needs to be absolutely on top of the technology and the research.
I really understand how important data is for making decisions. That's why I think it's really important to do the survey.
The survey takes just 10 minutes. It's a chance to have your say in the future directions for research, policy and industry priorities for Tasmania. You'll get to see how your responses compare to others across the state and have a chance to win one of 3 iPads.
We can't do it alone, so I'm hoping this research will help me in my business.
The more we know about what's going on in agriculture and food, the better.
Go online for more information about TasAg Future and how to get involved.
That's thanks to our remarkable comms team, particularly Mark and Claire. So I just wanted to add that video we filmed in a couple of days, and it doesn't nearly represent the diversity of folks that we've interviewed in this project, of course, but who are, of course, mostly in the commodity space. But there is a north-south divide as well that TIA needs to be quite conscious of in its image, which is probably why we're here today. But I would welcome any discussion and questions. Or no, I should let you do that, shouldn't I?
No, go ahead. Questions, discussion, comments, observations. It is stunning, I agree. Give us more than a taster. What's coming from those 100 conversations? What's the central thing you're going to take away from this?
So this is one of the conundrums of doing this sort of project, because we really are trying to look in detail at this sort of vast amount of information. 4 of us have done the interview, so we haven't all spoken to everyone. But okay, I will. Having said this caveat a few times now. I think what we're seeing is that there are all sorts of innovation going on. People don't talk about innovation whatsoever, hardly at all. But the types of innovation we're seeing are very different from what TIA has traditionally worked on. There are the key sectors that we have traditionally worked with, particularly in the horticulture, dairy sector. And we have huge visibility there and good connections. But there's so much more of agriculture and food that barely know what's going on in TIA and research, which is not surprising, but I would say that some of the things that we're finding is that the connective tissue between TIA and these constituents is not working effectively. We are not working as well as we could be with agronomists, for instance, and with other consultants to make sure that our research is getting through, and that we're listening and that we're hearing back. So there are challenges for collaboration there that we're looking into further. Some other things are around different mindsets within the state. We in research and science tend to be very, I think Fred pointed some of this out before, we tend to be very scientifically rational. A lot of people in agriculture have a very experiential way of learning and being, and we don't necessarily connect well with that. So thinking about the mindsets of innovation is something that's coming through in really interesting ways in the research at the moment, and the mindsets lead to particular processes which lead to particular outcomes. So we're mapping that out at the moment. Another, obviously with the capacity constraints and enablers, there's a huge array of things that everyone knows about. Issues around labour, issues around transport costs, etc., etc. I guess where we are hopefully adding value to that is looking at the way things like labour are connected to a diverse other array of issues which are dealt with in a policy context, and how we map those connections between, for instance, labour and technology. Technology is a labour-saving device, but we've had this discussion about many people who are low SES, poorly educated in the state. And that technology is taking away jobs which would be available for those types of people potentially. So there's all sorts of implications for our education system and for trades training and capacity building across the state that are coming through this research. I'm just opening a crack in the door to it, but it's it's big, and I'm not going to give you any conclusions right now. Yeah,
Did pretty well. Will you please thank Pete for this remarkable